Today we are going to be taking two images, one from a drone and one from a camera, and merging them together for a beautiful focal length blend image. How's it going, guys? My name is Riley Clark. I'm a nature photographer based out of Las Vegas, Nevada. If you are new to the channel, then maybe consider hitting that subscribe button so you don't miss out on all of the content that I produce, which mainly covers my time as a nature photographer. But that is enough of the pleasantries. Let's jump into the computer where I can start talking to you guys about what we're working on today. This image is actually taken from Alaska. This was taken back in 2021, and I actually captured a ton of drone footage in this area. My wife and I were driving, just out killing time, and we found this beautiful vista with this awesome glacier in the background, these cool epic peaks. Like everything was absolutely perfect about this location, but once I got back, I wasn't happy with the images I captured from here. Now, I was not in the best lighting condition. I was shooting at what felt like high noon, but I think it was at like 8 o'clock at night, to be honest, because the sun never sets. But regardless, the sun was pretty high. I want to say it was up in this general vicinity, and it casted a lot of harsh light on the environment. So it wasn't the most flattering, but I still felt like I can make it work, and I can definitely make this image work regardless. I've never really produced an edit of this image that I have liked. Last time I showcased this image was in a black and white edit, and it just honestly was subpar. It wasn't the best. So I started thinking about how could I incorporate this image with one I captured with my camera. Now, the image that I captured with the camera is beautiful, but I didn't really get a cool look of the lake down here like I did in this image. This image shows that full pond, which I believe gives the whole valley a sense of scale, and also acts as a leading line. But my biggest gripe with this image with the drone is it is at 8.38 millimeters. I think this was captured with the DJI Air 2. I didn't have the Air 2S yet. I think it was just a standard Air 2, but at 8.38 millimeters. So it's really wide, not really compressed, and I couldn't see the glacier as much. I didn't feel like it was a prominent piece to it. So now a quick disclaimer: if you are a purist photographer, then you probably should exit out of the video right now, because today we're going to be using some techniques that fall into more of a photo manipulation and not really into a purist photography standpoint. So the first thing that we're going to do is work with this image here and figure out where we can kind of cut some things and work with the light, because it's obviously overexposed. So the first thing I'm going to do is come up here and put on an Adobe landscape profile, and then I'm going to do an auto white balance, which looks a little green and looks a little warm. We'll probably play with that later. And then I'm going to come and drop my exposure down. And since I did that, I darkened this foreground way too much. So I'm going to go ahead and brighten the shadows and drop the highlights. And then I will pump my whites up. And since I'm not really worried about this mountain back here, I'm more worried about my foreground. I'm not going to worry about blowing that out as much. I'm just going to watch this mountain over here, which we will be keeping, and making sure that I don't destroy anything there or in this foreground. And then I'm going to lift my blacks. I'm holding Alt on my keyboard while doing this, so you can start to see where blacks creep in that way. So I'm going to lift these blacks up a touch. And so far, this is before and after what we have done. I will now drop the clarity. These drone images usually look way too crunchy, so I'm going to drop also the texture, just because I'm working with a really small sensor. I just find that it's harder to get it looking not over crunchy and weird. So I'm going to then come down here and boost my blue calibration, which that is the before and after there, and I might come back and boost up some vibrance. These greens look actually pretty yellowish orange to me, so I want to maybe mess with the hues of these and maybe push them a little bit more towards green. And you take my yellows and push these a little bit more richer green. Okay. And then I'm going to come in here and actually pull down the saturation and down the saturation a touch on them. And then for the luminance, I'm going to boost the yellows and drop the greens just to give a little bit more separation. So that's the before and after of that, which I felt like just gives it a lot better look. We got a lot of blues and greens in this. And actually I'm going to come up here now and drop overall vibrance. So again, before and after what we have done here so far. Now the next thing I'm going to do is crop this image. I feel like there's a lot of wasted space over here. Now it is kind of neat with this other river, but I wasn't flying high enough. So I'm kind of also tilted towards the right. So I kind of want to increase the focus of that. If I click R on my keyboard, I will pull up my crop overlay. And if I hit O, I can toggle through the different overlays on there. I usually use this, it looks like another rule of thirds, but it's actually a golden ratio. And I'm going to pull this in. Hold on. Let's go up here and lock this in. And just crop it in till about right there. I think that looks nice. Cool. Now what I do think I'm gonna do is come up here and do a sky selection. And then I'm going to subtract a linear gradient from that sky selection. Just to soften up the effect. And let's go ahead and drop the exposure a touch and pump some blues into it. And maybe add a touch of clarity, not too much, add some contrast. And then also I'm going to drop the saturation a touch because this is at like high noon and usually you don't really have big vibrant blue skies at this time. It's kind of washed out. So I am going to come down here and make sure my sharpening is turned off. That is one way to make it look terrible. And this is before and after what we've got going on. And I'm going to come back in here and play with the saturation of these greens and these yellows. I don't want them overly popping, but still balanced a lot better before and after. Okay. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to right click and I'm going to say edit in Adobe Photoshop. Now that we have that in Photoshop, it's time to work on the other image. Now this one's a little bit more underexposed, which is okay. What we can do is pull up the exposure. I'm not really paying attention to anything down here below. I'm more just looking at our mountains here. Let's go and put an Adobe landscape on it. Let's put an auto, white balance, drop our highlights down, lift our shadows, lift our blacks a touch. Add a little bit of contrast, not too much, and a little bit of negative dehaze. But you see we're starting to get really blue with it, so I'm going to increase our exposure again. And the reason it's kind of got a blue tint to it is I'm shooting with a 500mm lens. You can see, well actually I'm at 145mm, but I had a 100 to 500 on. And so I'm at 145mm shooting across this big hill or big vista, and there was actually a lot of smoke in the area. So you kind of get this hazy look, but it's all good. I'm gonna drop the clarity and actually drop the vibrance just a touch. Now let's mess with our sky here. Let's select our sky. We'll come in here, we're gonna select our sky, and we will then, once this loads, we're gonna subtract a linear gradient or intersect it with the linear gradient, doesn't matter. I'm gonna hit subtract, linear gradient. And just soften that up. And we're gonna drop the exposure. We're gonna add some contrast. We're gonna warm it up. We're gonna cool it off a touch actually, and desaturate it. contrast, put some whites in, put some blacks in. Cool. Yeah, so that's the before and after we have here. So let's then also go take this image, right click, go to edit in Adobe Photoshop 2023. Now we are going to begin our blending. Okay, so let's first start with this image here. We need to cut out this image. And what we can do to do that is find a nice line to work with. And I think if we follow this line here, that is going to be our best bet. So I'm going to come in with an eraser tool, our 6 size, and I'm just going to start to erase. So now that that is taken care of, let's go grab our other image here. If I hold shift and click, now I can grab this image and drop it in here. Let's put it in behind and shrink it down a touch. And I just want to find a good way for this to blend. Right about there, kind of seems good. Yeah, that's actually looking pretty nice. But I'm probably going to need to sky replace this. And I like to, that where I'm looking at positioning it is where this edge is kind of fading in behind the mountain. Makes it look a little more believable. And then I'm also looking at, I might even shrink it down there a touch too. Just so we're able to maybe pull in that peak, that would be nice. Yeah, that looks good right there. Yeah, this lake kind of creates almost an S shape here that looks really good. But now what we need to do is go in and clean this up a little bit more. Back to like a 6 on here, and I'm just going to see those chromatic aberrations and make them disappear and clean up this blend. I'm just looking for that chromatic aberration there. Any coloration change. Now we probably can create a merge visible of this. And we are going to put these in as a blend. Now, even though I did all that editing with the sky, we're going to probably have to deal with it and redo a sky. So we're going to go ahead and come up here and cut out this sky. Use like a 6. I'm at 200%. I'll probably zoom in around 300% sometimes, but Let's come in here and follow the skyline. The sky I bring in is not going to be bright. Let's try this. We're not super bright, but like sunset stuff, because we're not at sunset. But we might be able to make this work if we flip horizontal. No, because that's too bright there. Let's try this one. I'm just going to keep bringing a few in and getting a feel. This one's got a little bit of color in it. Yeah, I feel like I can make that believable. That isn't looking too shabby. And let's maybe bring some in like that. Yeah, not too bad. Now I can come in here with a color balance. I'm gonna hold Alt and click, and that's how I do that clipping mask. And it looks a little blue, so maybe we can throw some yellows in. And or maybe throw some blues in. Yeah, I think it needs to be a little bit more blue. A little bit more cyan. And maybe a touch of greens. So that's what's getting us a little bit better blend. And then if I come in here with a vibrance adjustment, again, hold Alt and click, I can then pull the vibrance down and give it a nice look. So that's the before clouds. This is the after clouds. And I think that looks actually pretty nice, giving us some nice tonalities. Awesome. Now that we got that sky replacement in, show you guys a couple tricks we can do with it. So I'm going to go Control Alt Shift and E, and let's go here and put these together as a sky replacement. So I got my blend and my sky replacement. I'm going to convert this to a smart object just so I can adjust it later on if I need, and I hit Control Shift A. I'm going to do a camera raw adjustment. Let me drag this to the screen so you guys can see, make it full screen. Now Camera Raw is the same thing as Lightroom, or same algorithms, just a little bit different of a layout. But here's our mask icon, and I'm looking for our sky. We gotta go do some of the adjustments like we did earlier, but there's two different adjustments we're gonna mess with here. We're going to subtract a linear gradient from the ground up, just to soften that, and we'll drop down the exposure of it. When we do that, it looks a little oversaturated, so I'm going to desaturate that just a touch. Oops, I accidentally exited out, but all I do is just double click on Camera Raw, and that puts me back in. And if I come up here, I can see that mask, which is nice. So that's one reason why we do that. Okay, we're gonna come up here and create a new mask. Select Sky, and we're going to subtract with a linear gradient, but this time we're going to go this direction and drag it up So just in behind. And what we're gonna do here is put some negative dehaze. Just to add a touch back and drag that up. And let's pull that down. Cool. Hit enter. So that's what this does. Just a little bit of dehaze, or adds a little bit of haze back to it, which helps clean up our lines. And then this is darkening the top. Pretty happy with how that is looking. Now, overall, I do think we're a little hot with our greens. I'm gonna come back to here and come to our color mixer, which is also the HSL. And we're gonna pull down our saturation of our greens and some of the yellows. I think we're just overdone a touch. So this is the before and after of what we just did. I'm gonna grab cleanup tool, this handy dandy one right here. We're just going to clean up these houses. There's just some cabins kind of scattered throughout. And then I'm probably going to come in here with the clone stamp tool. Just clean up this line a little bit more. I probably should have cleaned this up a little bit more before I merged it, but it's all good. We will fix that. A little bit of clone stamping never hurt nobody. Awesome. And then I want to actually move this tree right here because that's a little distracting. Let the AI do its thing. It actually did not a good job there, surprisingly. It's actually been very good most of the time. So let's retry that. Let's go smaller. Let's take out this branch here. And then this branch. And then I actually might come in with a clone stamp, a good old-fashioned clone stamp here. And just kind of clone stamp this out. And then we will darken that down. Cool. And actually one of the things I might do is change the perspective of this. We're going to save this though, because computers are crashed, or the Photoshop beta is crashing quite a bit, so that's what happens when you use a beta. Okay. Now, let's go and maybe adjust the perspective of this. If I come up here and I click this, I can drag this line down and out, and then maybe shift the perspective a touch. And then like up here is kind of bugging me. It's not like, oops. Kind of want this line to be a little bit straighter across. Yeah, that's better. A lot better. Okay. Now, to some more localized adjustments, I use Lemenzia for my luminosity mask. So I'm going to grab a mid like 2, and I'm going to create a levels adjustment off of this. So I'm going to targeting only the mid range. We're going to darken down by bringing that left point over. We'll brighten them up by bringing the right point over, and then adding some more contrast. And then I want to grab my brush and actually brush that one big pass out of here. Now let's add a new overlay layer. We're going to select the lights. we are going to brush in some brightness. Let me bring up my foreground color picker. So I usually like just a light, not pure white, but a little bit of warmth in it, just a little bit of yellow, and about 20% opacity. And we're just going to paint in some of these ridges here. Don't worry about if it spills over into the sky touch, that's okay. We will fix that in a second. So that is the before and that's the after, what we just did. And then I'm probably gonna come in here and put some blur on this water and brush in some of that. And so I'll show you guys that in a minute. But next thing we're gonna do, I'm gonna rename this to Dodge. I'm gonna create a burn layer. And this time I'm gonna use soft light. We're going to use a darks, probably like 3. Right there, it looks good. And we're going to use a black brush, this time with about 10% opacity. And I really want to focus on these peaks. This is where we want all the attention, all the drama up on these peaks. So that's the before and that's the after, and total before and after. Now what we're going to do is actually come down here and hit select sky. Told you not to worry about that sky, and this is why. Come up here, hit E on your dodge layer and just erase out that everything off of that. Now it's only affecting where you want it to affect. Cool. Now the next thing we want to do, like I was saying, is maybe after we save, come in here and maybe blur out some of these ripples and weird areas. So I'm going to come up here and hit Control-Alt-Shift-E to do a merge visible. And then I'm going to grab we're going to try Gaussian blur first. I'm looking more at the water than anything. Try 3.7. And then I'm going to put a mask on it. And then by clicking the mask and hitting Control-I, I can put a black mask on it. And we can then kind of come through and brush in some of this with a white brush, still about 30% opacity. And I'm really just looking more at these distracting areas. And you can see it's just kind of blending those together a little bit better. It doesn't have to be the whole lake. We're just trying to get rid of some of these poor color rendition blotchiness from my drone. This was one that I could really see, and it's just, you can see it's fading out the poor color. So that's the before, and that's the after. Before, after. I'm going to put just a mask on because everything else was good, but I don't think I'm going to use this right through here. So if we go to 100% opacity, I can get rid of that area. Nice thing about layer masks. Cool. Now the last thing I kind of want to do, a couple things I want to do here actually. We're going to add some light in over to the right. So I'm going to grab a brush and we're going to go to an overlay. We're going to make sure that we toggle the correct color. We're going to make this we're going to make the brush really big, and we're going to just right about here. We're going to just kiss that side. Okay. Now, because I did that, it's a little overdone, but I can come in here and just pull down the opacity for it. So that's the before and after of that, which looks nice. And then maybe I can come in with another soft light brush at hit the black color with a brush and darken in here a touch, this area. And I'm okay with being heavy right now, because then I can always just come through and pull the opacity back down. Cool, so those two, before and after, before and after, really just kind of shape the light. And last but not least, we're going to put a good old-fashioned Orton effect on this. We're gonna hit Control, Alt, Shift, and E, and we're gonna call this Orton. We're gonna come up here and go Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and we're gonna just bring this up until we can't quite see detail. And then I'm gonna hit Control, Shift, A, bring up another camera raw adjustment layer. We're gonna warm it up. We're going to add some vibrance. We're going to bring up the whites, bring down the blacks, add some contrast, bring up the highlights, bring down the shadows, make a disgusting looking image. And then from here, I'm actually going to use a lights on this, because highlights glow, shadows do not. And I'm not going to take credit for this style of Orton effect. I've learned this again from a couple different individuals. I believe Nick Page does something similar to this, and Mark Menderneck, who I've learned a lot of my post-processing from, uses this similar mindset. I'm gonna use this and click mask. If you didn't want to use a layer mask, you could just double click in here and you could use the underlying layer or blend if to do that. So I'm gonna hit cancel though, because I'm using a layer mask. Now this is obviously way too much, but I also might come in here and use a different blend mode. Like I might try a linear light blend mode and bring that in like so. There's not a lot of data with this image, so I don't mind it being super ethereal and hiding the fact that I don't have much data, or in terms of sharpness and stuff. So this would be normal. This is a linear light. Just adds a little bit more punch, and I could probably drop it down. I think it's overdone just a hair. Before and after. All right, the last thing I might do is play with some vibrance. I might pump some more color into this. Yeah, and I think I'm happy with that. I'm gonna put these all in one. So that's the before and that's the after. Before and after. Now I'm interested in hearing down in the comments what focal length blends you guys have worked with. Have you ever actually pieced together a shot from your camera and from a drone together? This is definitely the first time I've done that. Done a lot of focal length blends with shooting wide foregrounds and then a telephoto background, but I thought that this would be kind of a fun way to push my post-processing practices to the limits. So if you are new, please consider subscribing so you guys don't miss the next editing breakdown that I post. I also have some more in the field videos coming out here very soon.